Okay, dear class, hi 3F. For those of you who were not here in school today, we went through the remaining parts of the 10-year series with regards to cells. Okay, so as usual, all these answers are already uploaded onto Google site, and I'll run through the main questions here that might be of some concern to some of you. Okay, moving down the MCQ area. Okay, if you have trouble, of course, drop me a message. These are the answers to question 1. When we talk about plant organ, okay, a plant organ is like talking about a heart in human beings, eyeballs, lungs. So, organ in a plant are things like the leaf, the root, okay, the stem, the fruit. So in this case, where would you find this organ? You would find this in the root area. And we have to state the function of the cell and describe how it is adapted to carry out its functions. So looking over here, you can see that the function of it is to absorb water and mineral salt. Some of you, during my marking, only gave things like water and minerals or water and salts. You have to be very clear to state that it is the absorption of water and mineral salts. Next, the adaptation to function is that it has a long protrusion to increase the surface area to volume ratio. You have to put down the phrases that I've highlighted in yellow. And some of you wrote for more absorption. You have to use the word faster rate of absorption. And of course, why is this cell not able to carry out photosynthesis? That's because it lacks chloroplast. You'll find that this question is repeated even in its 2018 paper for 1 mark. The reason is Cambridge has a typical tendency to repeat its questions. So, describing how the root hair cells adapted to its function, talk about the long protrusion, talk about the increase of surface area to volume ratio, talk about a faster rate of absorption. Okay? Moving on. Okay, that is the end of the 10-year series. Okay, you can find the answers all online on Google site. We moved on to movement as well, the notes. So, the main thing that is going to be coming out for your WA next week on Thursday, in addition to cells, is movement of substances, and we are going to mainly talk about diffusion. Okay, so diffusion is done in terms of the vibration of molecules. They're always vibrating and they want to go from a place of higher concentration to a place of lower concentration. And it goes down a concentration gradient. Now, if you look over here, I drew an additional green dotted line. Now, the green dotted line going from the top, which I gave an arbitrary value of 20 moles per dm cube, to 0 right at the bottom. You can see where the green dotted line went all the way to bottom. That was an additional example to show you 2 gradients of concentration. The red one is not as steep as the green one, and as such, for the green one, the diffusion will occur at a faster rate. Note the way I keep on using the word rate. Now, the most important part for diffusion is to know the definition that I've given here in that I've put a star on it. Okay, so particles can be replaced with words like sucrose, like sugar, salt, copper sulfate, or just about any other thing except water. So do take note of this definition and take it as the most important one that you have to remember. Okay, I'm going to show you a few things about membranes when it comes to diffusion. If it's things like the cell wall over here is fully permeable. And what happens is that all substances are able to pass through. But if you get a partially permeable membrane, like cell surface membrane, what happens is that only certain molecules can pass through, but not others, because it is partially permeable. Okay, so an example of diffusion would be like putting this copper sulfate crystal in the bottom corner of a gas jar, filling it up with water, and after a few days, the copper sulfate, the blue color of the copper sulfate, will be seen throughout the entire gas jar. Now, what if you have a membrane? I know that in your notes, the potassium iodide molecules or the particles, which are highlighted in orange or yellow in my diagram, it's not very visible in your notes. So I asked the class to kind of like dot them in red. What happened is that at the very beginning, one side has lots of red dots, the potassium iodide, the other side has a lot of blue dots, copper sulfate. After a while, you leave it for a while, the particles, which are small enough to pass through the openings in the membrane, causes both sides to be evenly distributed. I'm going to show you a quick video of what it might look like. Now, I'm going to put a bunch of particles on one side. Let's say I put about 100 blue particles on the left side. And on the right side, I'm going to put also about 100 blue particles. So I'm not going to change all the other settings, and I'm going to remove the divider. Watch what happens to the particles. Once the barrier is partially removed and the particles of red and blue are capable of passing through the gap, you will see that diffusion goes from a place of higher concentration to a region of low concentration. So initially, the blue was very concentrated on the left side and none was on the right side. Look at what's happening now. The blue is slowly diffusing from the left to the right, and if we allow this to go on for a longer period of time, you will see that there is a net amount on both sides that's almost the same. Okay, take note that the blue is constantly going from left to right and right to left as well. Same for the red dots. So there's always movement from left to right for either of the colors, but after a while, when the concentration of both sides are the same, there will be no net movement. Okay, so let's go back to the notes. That's what happened in the second option over here, where copper sulfate and the potassium iodide are now fully distributed. So, diffusion only stops when the copper sulfate particles are evenly distributed throughout the liquid. Okay, as it goes over here, the particles are still moving. It's just that there's no overall movement. So, roles of diffusion in nutrient uptake in both gaseous exchange in humans and in plants. So in terms of gaseous exchange, we can see that for in our lungs, the red particles, which are oxygen, diffuse from the alveolus, which is an air sac in your lungs, from the left side to the right side, which is the blood vessel or the blood capillary. So the oxygen is flowing from a place where there's high concentration on the left side inside the alveolus air sac into the red blood cells. Similarly, the carbon dioxide is being depicted by those black dots, and they diffuse from the bloodstream, which is very high in concentration, into the lungs, which is a very low concentration. Similarly, diffusion can also take place in the root hair cells, whereby it takes in oxygen for respiration and gives off carbon dioxide. I mean, in the roots, you don't have photosynthesis taking place. So what takes place in return as well, all the time, in fact, in all plant cells, other than the xylem, is that respiration is taking place, whereby oxygen diffuses into the root hair cell for respiration, and carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the root hair cell for under diffusion. Okay, so, right. If you want to go on further, there's also roles of diffusion whereby nutrients are being taken up in the human being. And if you recall, I keep talking about surface area to volume ratio. If the surface area to volume ratio is higher, of course, the diffusion rate is also higher. Okay, that's pretty much what we went through today in a very short period of time. Do watch the video, and if you have to, watch it again in order to gain a full understanding of what's going on. And if you need help, please, those who are on MC and are not around in school today, do drop me a message if you need some help. Okay, with that, I'm signing off. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening in.